Well, howdy. Welcome, retro cultists and Schlockaholics alike, to episode 3 of Schlockaholics. We are joined today, obviously, by our regular co-hosts, Septum Sin and Cody Tudor. And we are going to be talking about the 1983 Fred Olen Ray classic, Scalps. Not a movie without its issues, but one that I'm quite fond of. This was my choice in the rotation here. And I believe, at some point after today, we're going to have to, or maybe at the end here, we'll throw a couple options out and spin to see what our next film is going to be. It's anybody's guess. I've got a couple of submissions myself. But I think this could be a pretty good discussion. It's a film that certainly gave us a lot to talk about and is a great example, our first example of proper old school, like indie schlock. Our first two selections were kind of newer films. This is taken all the way back to 1983, like I said. But before we jump into our, first impressions and all that stuff, we're going to go ahead and show you the trailer for Scalps so that you've got a little taste of what this has to offer here. So here we go.
She did not know she was calling evil spirits of the past. They did not listen to the warnings before digging up the sacred ground of the dead.
I'm feeling the evil in this ground. It's alive with evil. Stop it!
Scalps. Now they have awakened a terror unknown.
She's nuts. You'll all die if you don't stop. We must leave. We must.
All dead. And then they became part of the land.
Enter a bizarre new world of unspeakable horror never before shown in a motion picture. Black magic will surround you.
Look. It's blood. And it's coming from nowhere.
Your blood will run cold.
Ellen! Ellen! Where are you?
When the dead walk the earth, the living must die. Scalps. 100 years of hatred uncovered.
It's drums.
Drums and chanting.
Let me in.
Spirits tormented in death ravage cruelty on the living.
Where's it coming from? From hell.
Hold your head in fear that you are next. The only movie that you may not be strong enough to watch to the end. Scalps. Never disturb the graves of the dead. Rated R. No one under 17 will be admitted without a parent.
All right, so that was the trailer for Scalps, which was directed and written by Fred Olen Ray. It stars Joanne Robinson, Richard Hench, Roger Maycock, and several other people that nobody knows who they are. We got cinematography by Larry Van Loon and Cynthia Webster. It was edited by John Barr. It's got a fucking phenomenal synth score by Drew Newman and Eric Rasmussen. It was distributed by 21st Century Film Corporation, released at some point in 1983, and had a budget of $15,000, which is very hard to believe. I don't know where that went. Cocaine, maybe? It's a classic, in Fred Olen Ray's filmography, because it's really the first film he ever made that was intended for a theatrical release. I don't know if it ever got a proper one. I think it pretty much went straight to video stores and stuff like that, but it might have played some drive-ins and whatnot. I forget. This was my choice, so we're going to go ahead and save my first impressions for last. I guess we'll start with you, Brandon. Was this your first time watching Scalps? Are you familiar with Fred Olen Ray, and what do you think of him and this film?
I don't know why, because every time I hear the name, I keep thinking of Chucky for some reason. I think the killer was it had a similar name, but I can't think of the name of the
Charles
killer.
Lee Ray.
Yeah, Charles Lee Ray is
kind of serial killer-ish. The three,
but
three-word names. I guess we all have them. But
I heard about this film a little while ago when you mentioned it for the channel. But I hadn't heard of it before this. It's kind of weird. I feel like even though I've been into B level movies, I keep stumbling into new ones. Like, oh well, nope, not even a moderate. I'm still a newbie, and it's years of going through lots and lots and lots of these things.
Oh yeah, that's the beauty of it, man. There's always new directors or new films to discover, and it's truly
But I saw
invigorating.
that cover. Don't knock over the camera. Sorry, my cats decided they wanted to become cameramen. Yes, I've got that myself, and I had to get it because that cover art was killer, literally. And watching it, it was fun to watch. I really enjoyed it. I mean, yeah, it's that low quality thing, but there were some fun effects and just enjoyable kills. I liked it. Followed the slasher formula really well. In my opinion, it's definitely a gem. Glad to have it in the collection.
Fuck yeah, dude. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It's certainly a unique slasher film. I mean, it does the supernatural slasher thing better than a lot of things that have attempted it. So what about you, Cody? Were you familiar at all with Fred Olen Ray or this film? And if either way, what was your impressions of this film?
Fred Olen Ray for sure. Seen a lot of his stuff. So I don't remember if, I think you had told me he did it, and maybe I forgot until I started watching it yesterday. But once I saw his name on it, I knew I was in for a treat. 15 grand and 83. I mean, that's a lot of money considering.
Yeah.
But like you said, I don't really know. I mean, unless it went to just gore effects, I'm not really sure how, unless it was just travel to wherever they went. But I really enjoyed it. Like we talked about a little bit last night, like now I want to buy it, especially for nothing else, just to hear the commentary and all the special features on it. But it's
worth it. Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. It was very good.
What was your first Fred Olen Ray movie? Do you recall?
Not off the top of my head, no.
See, I got acquainted with Fred through Hollywood Chainsaw Hookers. That was the first movie that I saw from him, and pretty much instantly fell in love with that because it's fucking rad. But, you know, obviously this is one of those first ones you discover when you start looking into his earlier filmography, and it's much better than his previous film, Alien Dead, which actually we'll be talking about tomorrow with our pal David Straggy on Delusions of Grandeur. So tune in for that at 11 a.m. over there. It's crap, but this is, you know, a much better effort. I pretty much immediately fell in love with this one the first time that I watched it. It's kind of like if you took The Hills Have Eyes and mixed it with Evil Dead or something like that. You know, a lot of people might kind of scoff at the whole Native American burial ground gimmick, but I can't think of too many horror films that have really touched on that hard outside of this. I mean, you know, Pet Sematary is the other one that comes immediately to mind. I'm sure there's several others, but it is kind of an untapped area of horror that I feel like it's kind of a shame that, you know, we haven't seen more of it, you know. So we got, you know, a general cast of characters here. In some senses, they are sort of like different to your typical slasher movie kids in that they're like learned college kids or whatever. They're not just a bunch of high school kids out on a camping trip. They're on an actual archaeological grave robbing expedition. But, you know, they still kind of fall into the typical mold of people. You know, you got like the jerk, the fucking nerd, and like the dude that looks like the brawny paper towel man. And, you know, their girlfriends, respectively. Or I don't think DJ's anybody's girlfriend. She's just an annoying, like, new age chick that's really into Native American stuff. But the other two dudes brought their girlfriends, and they're fine, I suppose. The one chick is really dumb. The other chick is really hot. And DJ's just really weird. So it's a good, well-balanced cast of I don't even want to call them kids, really, because they are clearly grown adults that are out here, like, working for the college or whatever for some type of credit. Just robbing Native American artifacts out of the ground, even though they've been explicitly told fucking not to. So what do we think of the cast of characters here, first and foremost?
We're not going off the kids, but I was a little bummed that the professor didn't go with him. because it looked like he was dressed up and ready to
Yeah.
go. I mean, he got the full-on safari hat, and then he didn't get to go with them. So
Also,
that
I'm pretty sure that guy was drunk reading all of his lines, so I'm pretty sure it would have made the movie hilarious if that guy was involved for the whole thing.
He was great. I also like the guy who was the Harbinger. I mean, that guy was great too. He had a lot of cool
Keith
side
Richards or whatever.
I actually like the
I never
side
thought about
characters.
that until Cody said it in the chat. Go ahead, sorry.
I actually like the side characters more than I like the main character.
Yeah, me too.
Which is fine because to me, I really don't think that you need to like them. No, let me change that. If you want the film to scare you, you should have some sort of relationship with the main characters. Because if you don't care about them, then you're not going to be scared. You'll be like, hey, whatever. But in a movie like this, I don't have to like the main characters. I can actually get more enjoyment out of watching them get killed. So I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's you don't necessarily. I don't like these characters per se, but they're not hateable like some characters in certain slasher films can be, where it's like, oh, I just want this dude to die. All these kids are okay, or young adults, whatever. They're kids. Let's just fall back. It's always the shorthand for slasher movies. They're fucking kids. The one guy's got a beard. He's probably had it since he was 7. You see how fucking thick that thing is. So, I mean, they're not hateable. And even DJ, as annoying as she is with her new wavy, like, I'm the weird girl. I'm going to go sit alone and make this fucking dude with his Brillo pad hair come and talk to me to comfort me and shit. She's annoying at points, but she's cringeworthy enough that it's kind of funny for the majority of it. So it's, I don't know. I like all the characters.
Yeah, they weren't bad. They were just
super hot.
They were just very generic. I mean, I'm sure for the time, I mean, there's not much time spent in character development. I think we're kind of in the same spot where we kind of like the extras or the secondary characters seem like they were more enjoyable. Like the native Keith Richards, he was. I wanted more of that.
He was fun. And the gas station attendant dude or whatever.
Yeah.
I forget his name, but that's the only guy in this I feel like I recognize for sure from other stuff other than Forey Ackerman's cameo, which we will get to. Oh shit, we got a comment. Oh, it's Michael. Okay, stream's official now. What's up, buddy? Yeah, I mean, great cast of characters all around, and it's real light. You know, there's probably like 8 or 10 people in the entire movie, and 3 of them aren't even on screen for most of it. So it's real easy to keep track of everyone. Interestingly enough, though, DJ is the only one whose name I can ever remember. And I've seen this movie probably 8 times in the last year alone. And yeah, she's just so weird that I can't help but remember her name. And they say it several times. I feel like a lot of the other people in the movie, their names are only said like once, and it doesn't matter anyways. It's like, oh, it's beard guy and jerk guy and nerd guy. You know, that's all you need to know.
Well, DJ makes it easier.
Yeah,
I plus the Full House thing. I mean, you know, good.
Yeah, I didn't hate any of the characters, but I didn't really have an attachment. So, like I said, it made losing them easier. It didn't make it. Now, I admit, if you can have a cast of really dislikable characters, it's actually kind of fun to watch them get cut up at the end. Like a good example, the more recent Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. I know that a lot of people don't like that one, but I swear it has a cast full of unlikable characters. And Survivor Girls,
the coin too. I don't get the hate that new Texas Chainsaw gets.
I liked it.
People either think it's like woke or that it's not or whatever, and it's like, no, it's meant to be. He's killing all of you. You know.
I mean,
everybody has characters in it they can hate, and everybody fucking bites the dust. So I don't get the problem. You know, just
when they pull out those phones,
popcorn and watch the fucking movie.
They're like, you're canceled and all that, and then he starts hacking them apart. I'm just like, yeah, I have no feeling for any of them.
And see, dude, the thing is that, like, you know, anti-woke fucking people or whatever will be like, oh, it's so lame because the kid says the thing about canceling him or whatever. And it's like, and then he sends them into an absolute fucking meat grinder. He kills like everybody on the bus, you know, ends their live stream, you know, so, and their life. So I don't get the complaints, but yeah, I get that, man. I mean, it's rad to watch like a cast of hateable characters get fucked up, But like you said, if you have some kind of connection, or at least in the very least indifference, kind of like this, you might sort of hope some of them survive, you know. And in this one, thankfully, none of them do. I'm always a fan of everyone dying, even if I kind of hope a couple of them live. But I think we dropped connection there for a moment. But you guys get what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that made Texas Chainsaw good for the opposite reasons. But this one, they were, yeah, for sure. And you mentioned The Hills Have Eyes and Evil Dead. It gave me a Hills Have Eyes and Monos, The Hands of Fate. Were my two that I got offended for.
Yeah,
I got that same sort of weirdness and surreal quality that Manos has too. But on like to a lesser extent, obviously, because you can't match that mastery. But
that might be my next pick.
I mean, I think that when you come to it, actually, this one has some similarities to Evil Dead in the likability factor, is because that movie I was actually neutral to all the characters, including Ash in the first one, because Ashley was just kind of annoying a little bit through the first part of it. So at the same time, it was, so I do like it when you have to guess whether they're going to kill everybody or not. And when you come at it, like for me, it's a new director, so I don't know which way it's going to go. And that's kind of cool, not knowing whether they're going to all live or die.
Right. And obviously we know how it ends up, but I had my money on that nerd dude being like the guy. And if they had made the sequels or the sequel that they planned to this, which could have potentially led to more sequels, that dude could have been like the Ash of the franchise, you know, that nerdy archaeologist dude. It would have been like a cool mixture of like Ash and Indiana Jones and like, you know, that kind of a thing. But so if anything, they kind of made a mistake by killing that dude. Granted, his death is one of the best deaths in the movie. But yeah, they maybe should have left him alive, but they left DJ alive, so she could always become the Ash of the series as well. Which I guess since we mentioned it, we'll talk about it. Yeah, they tease a sequel at some point during the credits of this one. We never got it, but we did get like a Scalps 2 fan film, which is actually included on the Blu-ray, as well as footage from a remake that was in production for a little bit, I think it is. I feel like I watched the fucking fan film once, but I was pretty wasted. I never watched the footage from the remake, but I'm intrigued by it. I might actually watch that when we're done here.
I'll have to hit those once I got Jumbo and Sanjiro watched. I'll have to hit this fan film.
Right. Yeah, it's worth checking out. I mean, just to see what could have been. I feel like this movie definitely had potential to spawn sequels. And it would have been a unique addition to, like, you know, the franchises of the day, I think, if there had been several Scalps films. Because, again, you know, the vengeful native spirits thing is kind of untapped. Usually you see it thrown in as, like, a random segment in a friggin' anthology movie or something like that. There's not too many horror films that I'm aware of, at least, that's the core theme of it. But, yeah, I don't know. I guess we've done the characters justice. There's not too much to say about them other than what we'll say as they get dismantled on screen throughout this discussion. So basically the plot of the movie is we have this sweet professor dude who's like just in it for the cash, it seems like he's like a sweet archaeological professor that's all about going out and just robbing, you know, native artifacts and selling them, you know, or donating them to schools for probably kickbacks or whatever he's up to. The dean of his school, I think it is basically telling him, like, yeah, you can't do this stuff. You submitted this request to go on this expedition that's clearly a grave robbing expedition. Not only is that frowned upon and we don't want to be associated with that, but it's fucking illegal, bro. And he's just like, oh, I would never, you know, but then he just sends a bunch of his, are they interns or are they students? I always miss that part because I'm laughing at like the dialogue of them packing up and stuff, but
I don't remember.
No clue. They could be either.
Or a mixture of both even.
Oh, yeah.
There's something like that. Doesn't really matter. He sends them in his stead to go on this expedition anyways, and just dig crap up out of the ground, clean it up, and bring it back to the school for him to do whatever he's doing with it. We get a really cool cameo by Forrest Ackerman, or Forrest J. Ackerman, I believe is his full name. He's actually in the bottom right of the screen there, peeking out of the corner. A legendary dude behind Famous Monsters of Filmland, which was basically the precursor to Fangoria and all the great horror mags we've all grown up with today. Were you guys aware that's who that was when he runs into him in the hall?
Well, that makes more sense why he was holding that magazine then. Because wasn't he holding one of those magazines?
They make a big deal out of this random dude he bumps into, and he's like, "Oh, stop reading that stuff. You should stick to history," or something like that. What about you, Brandon? Were you familiar with Forey?
No, not at all.
Oh, dude's a legend, especially when it comes to, well, I mean, think about it. Back in pre-internet days when kids relied on magazines, like even magazine, I think Famous Monsters was like the first monster mag, you know? It was just all about monster movies, obviously. And teaching people effects. I think they might have pioneered that as well. I've never read a ton of Famous Monsters because that's a bit before our time. I was a Fangoria kid for sure. But, you know, I have a lot of respect for it because without it, we wouldn't have any of that shit. And he's just a cool old dude. I mean, look at him with his Romero shades and his slicked back hair down there. I mean, Forey didn't fuck around. But yeah, he basically just sends these kids out there to do what he was going to do anyways. And once he gets done submitting, I believe, an inventory, because this lady's, you know, after she scolds him, the dean, for even trying to do this, she's like, plus we've, you know, you can't go anyways because we ordered an inventory of all the shit you've been stealing from you a while back, and you've got to complete that, basically. So the professor has to stay behind and do that shit. And then once he's done, he's going to meet them out in the desert. What do you guys think of the introduction of these kids? I absolutely love that fucking scene where they're packing the station wagon up or whatever and getting ready to go.
I swear, of course, then again, I know I see these before, and it kind of brings me back to Cabin in the Woods. And I wonder if they saw Scalps as a part of their education for making that movie, which actually I wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Wouldn't be surprised, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, great way to introduce them. I think having them all as working with them, be a student or interns or both, I think that works really well in any of these settings.
Yeah, I mean, it was.
I absolutely. Go ahead, Cody.
We're also, I mean, we're jumping. I'm sure they took from that was going back to the first episode, and that's kind of how they introduced the kids or the gang in the first Axe Grinder we watched. They were getting ready to loading the car up and waiting on some people to show up. So I mean, it was pretty basic setup, but it's effective.
It's got one of the funniest fucking exchanges of dialogue in the entire movie, though, where that girl's like, geez, you'd think we're going to Europe. And that guy turns around and looks at her and he just goes, bitch. And then he goes back to packing and there's like that awkward silence for a minute. And he's like, you're just so rude or whatever. I think that's the only part where that dude's name is said. And then he's like, hey, I'm just making a social comment. I love that as the comeback. It's like, it was indeed a comment you made socially.
Right.
Fucking rude too. She wasn't even like ragging on him. She just said, geez, you'd think we were going to Europe. Like, we got a lot of bags. And he's like, bitch. So good. But yeah, then they're pretty much on the road, which takes an inordinate amount of time. The one complaint people seem to have about this movie that's unanimous, and I can fully agree with it, is that it should probably be like 25 minutes shorter. Because there's just a lot of traveling at the beginning of the movie and then several chunks of dead space in between that could be edited different. We'll get to that when we get to the production at the end, because there's notes from Fred himself on that stuff. But yeah, that just takes way too long. But we do get the Keith Richard, like, doomsayer guy in there, you know, basically telling them, like, you motherfuckers are going out to the desert to dig, aren't you? You're going to fucking die, basically. Don't go near the black trees. Which, interestingly enough, is just something that was there on the ranch that they were going to shoot this. And Fred just worked it into the script. But I thought it was like a cool, ominous kind of a thing. Like, you know, even though they just were from like a brush fire, In the context of the movie, it makes it really spooky that there's like these random black trees. You get the idea they've been black for like hundreds of years or something.
Right.
But yeah, what do we think of that scene? There is a brief moment in there too where they're considering just faking the whole thing and buying a bunch of arrowheads and then just taking them back to that dude, which is probably the better plan. I mean, I don't know. Well, you have to have a passion for archaeology, though, I think, to even be interning or studying that shit. So they probably want to go dig for the stuff. But
I don't know. Going on what some of them were like, what, you just dig? Like, it's like, so why did you come here? Yeah, that first, I love the Harbinger scene in this. I think that they did it well. It was handled great. I didn't mind the pacing in this film, and usually that's the thing I am the one who always comes down on. It's kind of good getting to know the characters a little bit before they get hacked apart. Though, yeah, I do think that, but I do think that this Harbinger scene was very well done because you had multiple Harbingers in a way, because it went from there, and you had one person who had common sense, and she was like, okay, these are there, go. And I also love how the other guy they talked to, he's just like, nah, I don't even bother. They'll learn one way or the other. I love that.
Yeah, you can't say nothing to those city folks. I love that part because it is like kind of a commentary on the typical doomsayer scene where it is like a gas station attendant, like in The Hills Have Eyes, that's telling them not to go out there. And they just don't fucking listen, so fuck them. I think it's great scene. I love how Fred, it's such a on-the-fly DIY indie filmmaker thing to throw in that line about how it's so fucking loud by the highway right there at the beginning of the whole thing. Like they're trying to talk and their dialogue's just getting fucking blown out by all the cars going by. And the one dude manages to shout like, damn, it sure is loud out here. Something like that. And they just leave it in unless it was intentional. Either way, it's genius because it's just makes the best out of the situation. They shot this movie with no permits. So that was just some gas station they stopped at, and the people were cool enough to let them shoot there, basically. Which I feel like would be less common now. Go ahead, Cody.
Right. I think also we were talking about when Septum mentioned about they were asking, so we just dig. That would make me think that probably maybe just the girlfriends or maybe a couple of those people were just along for the ride and not necessarily went to that school, because when they mentioned, oh, let's get some beer, like, oh, now you're talking, and they're just coming out for a good time at the desert.
Come to think
of
it,
one airhead chick, I think, was just the dude's girlfriend, and then the other girl was either a really enthusiastic girlfriend about like her boyfriend's archaeology shit, or she was also a student. That's what I've always gathered, because she's got like the jorts or whatever, and she's got like a kerchief around her neck, like she's out there ready to do some fucking Jurassic Park style like digging. She looks like she came prepared, whereas the other girl's like, oh, we just dig or whatever, this is lame, and to be fair, there's a couple of scenes where she had a look on her face like she was clearly out of her depth too, and her acting was the worst in the entire movie.
If I had one complaint about it overall as far as low budget, and I grade on a curve for these movies, I always do,
of course,
but character definition. I mean, all three of us are like, not sure why they're here, could be interns. It would be one thing if one of us was like that, but with all of us, that's more of a movie problem at that point. Because that tells me
I'm
that
sure it's said, it's just there's so much goofy shit going on with that professor that I'm always just kind of laughing at him, and then it goes into the kids like loading the car and you're laughing at that, and it just gets lost, I guess, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think it was just said probably too briefly, and that's probably why we're not like catching.
And that's a flaw for sure, because there shouldn't be three dudes here who just watch the movie that don't know what the fuck these kids are. Students, it says on Wikipedia, but take that with a grain of salt.
We're also going on, I mean, that scene being the three of one of our each of us favorite scenes, and that's really, I mean, a scene with that's, if that shouldn't, them going to like a gas station and interacting with some people that don't come back into the movie, that shouldn't be your favorite scene. And it is. I mean, that kind of also can tell you a little bit about the character development or something along those lines.
Yeah, there's not much of it to be had. I mean, I could buy, maybe if we wanted to really theorize about it, the airhead chick it's possible these expeditions to go dig up random stuff for this Greybraven professor are even used as like a punishment for, being behind on credits or grades or something. So maybe that girl's like doing it as like some extracurricular way to make up school. I never went to college, so I don't know if that's how that works there, but sometimes in like high school you could do like, some shit for a credit from this dude or whatever that had nothing to do with the credit that you're missing. You could just make up a credit right there.
I'm sure you definitely could, more so in the 80s than you could now.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's probably true too. So there's multiple theories about these kids. I suspect they just exist to get killed, and they do a fine job of that. Especially that fucking brawny paper towel man. We'll get to that. So basically, they ignore this dude's shit and just go out there. He thinks that, I think the one dude comments that the guy's probably just telling him some bullshit to keep him out of the desert because he's probably got a still out there or something like that. So they just blow on by and then spend like another 15 minutes with a bunch of driving scenes. Now, not for nothing, even though it is a complaint about the movie for me in terms of like using the travel time to pad the film. It is really nice Southern California scenery that we're looking at there too. So it builds the isolation of the film pretty well by showing all this like dead, bleak sort of desert landscape that they're driving into, and super dusty roads and all that stuff. It lends to the hills have eyes quality of it for sure. Interspersed throughout all of this, we're seeing, like, from basically the point that they meet the doomsayer guy onward, we're seeing little snippets of like death scenes or these Indian creature zombie type things. What did you guys think when they started cutting that stuff in there?
That's how I knew I was in for a good time.
Right? Gives you a little taste,
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Interestingly enough, I would say that also helps with the pacing, and is probably why Brandon is not as critical of it as I am, because they pepper that in there strategically. And that is something that Fred didn't do. He was actually kind of pissed that the distributors did it, because the lion thing, for one, was just test footage that they shot, but it's one of the coolest things in the movie. And then the random, like, I guess you could call them spoiler clips that they cut in there. I don't think it really spoils it because it's out of context. So you're like, oh, whoa, what the fuck? And then when you see it all come to pass, it's like, oh, rad. That was so worth the wait. That was the distributor. So this is an odd example of a movie where in post, the fucking studio basically fucked with the film, but it worked in its favor, because without that, the first third of this movie would be dreadful. It'd just be these kids driving, and then having like a sleepover the first night. That would be it for like the first 30 minutes of the movie. But they cut in those little bits, and it's like tantalizing morsels of what's to come. So they get out in the desert, and DJ's pretty much immediately kind of spooked. Obviously she's like this new wave, I wouldn't call her a hippie chick. She just looks like a regular like 80s girl next door or whatever, but she's real into the native thing, and she kind of is the first one to feel uncomfortable, obviously, with what they're doing out there. And the others just kind of blow it off as DJ being a fucking weirdo, and set about, trying to find these artifacts. And, they're looking and looking, and then they end up stumbling upon a full-on treasure trove of them down in this little gully. So they decide to set up camp and start, God damn it. They decide to set up camp and start, picking their way through the ground, see what they can dig up to take back to the professor. And, that's kind of where the real movie begins, I guess. I don't know, not to get too serious or anything, but what is your guys' stance on that? I've always thought that it's fine to like dig around and look for that stuff out in nature, as long as if you like find arrowheads, you turn them into the proper people or whatever. I don't know if that's some white dude fish game warden like they tell you to here, I think, yeah, I'd probably feel more comfortable taking them out to the reservation and surrendering them back to the actual people that probably have a claim to them. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's fine to do that stuff. You know, I don't know that any of these kids are aware of what this dude is doing with them, and it's clearly implied that the professor is into some seedy shit. But you know, on the level of being these students, I don't know if I would have a problem going out there. It would feel legit to me, is what I'm saying.
See, to me, I'm kind of indifferent on it for the most part, except for burial grounds. Burial grounds should be off limits because that's sacrilegious. If you're just walking around in the woods and you come upon an arrowhead, well, you know, that was just like an arrow some dude shot and left. I don't really feel like that's a huge issue. But I mean, for instance, where I lived, I mean, there used to be Indian encampments all around where I lived growing up, and you would find arrowheads in the soil as they'd be tiered up. But you know, if it's like a burial ground, yeah, that should be off limits. Otherwise, though, if you're doing archaeological studies and you're digging up like a lost city or something like that, I think that's, you know, for science.
Yeah,
should be looked at, learn about people, especially ones that have disappeared, like the Mayans and stuff like that. You find a lost city, dig that stuff up and display it.
Yeah, I mean, you think about
in this. Go ahead, Cody. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're fine. I mean, if you look at the convenience store, was selling them for $1, so they weren't very hard to come by if they had a whole basket full. So I would say, as long as you're digging where you're supposed to dig, I guess, and that's not really what you do in a horror movie, is do things you're supposed to do. But I agree with Brandon on his line of thinking of where you should and shouldn't be messing around.
Right. And to be fair, in the movie, they just really end up finding what seems to be the remnants of some old battlefield, or I think it is a battlefield. Oh shit! I think my signal dipped there momentarily. But to be fair, in the movie, they pretty much end up just digging around an old battlefield, which is altogether different from a burial ground. You know, I feel like that's fair game. It's just a place where a battle happened, and they're finding random, like, you know, stone knives and you know, jewelry or odd pieces of pottery and stuff like that. It's not like they're literally robbing graves. And I don't understand why this one particular native spirit, what was it, Black Claw? Isn't that the name of it?
I think so.
I think that's just the one that happened to hop into one of their bodies. You know, I don't know that he had a particularly personal claim over this. It just said that he was one of the people that died fighting there or something. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's reason enough to possess these kids, but I guess if you're just like hanging around in the afterlife waiting to possess people, why not? It's odd that they didn't possess the old man that kills himself after finding the first artifact, which is sort of a prelude to them leaving, and then we end up seeing his desiccated corpse with like a rad fucking rat crawling around on it. And they end up, you know, his truck comes into play later, but
I was about to mention that because that is a great setup for the film. And, you know, I mean, it's standard vengeful spirit 101, you know. I died, I was PO'd at somebody, or I was an evil dude who still PO'd at some. They're always PO'd at somebody anyway when they die. And then they, you know, they end up just killing people. I mean, that's all you really need is just be mad. Maybe, like, you know, you could do a horror movie, guy stubs his toe, then has a heart attack, and he's mad because he stubbed his toe, and then he's going to kill people when they come into the house, you know, that sort of thing.
There you go. I mean, I like to think, too, that this native spirit just had a strong urge to wear a tight pair of Levi's because he looked good running around in those once he possessed that dude. It's, you know, it's all relative, I guess. I wasn't there at the battle. I don't know how it went. Maybe this dude is fucking extra fired up at the whites. But, you know, he ends up basically possessing one of the kids. Well, we're skipping around a bit. They find the first of the artifacts as DJ is just freaking the fuck out because the whole vibe of the place is getting to her. I think by that point she's actually starting to see like visions and stuff. I think she might be the first one to get a glimpse of that weird lion creature, which also is, again, just test footage. But I think that the way that the distributors edited it in works so fucking perfectly for the movie. You know, it just makes it feel like it's like some type of native, you know, there's a bunch of native hoodoo going on out here. These things are pissed, and there's like this lion thing, and it's just weird and cool. Who cares? But, you know, she's starting to, she's more attuned to this stuff than the other guys with her spirit sticks and shit. So she's like starting to freak out and trying to tell them like we shouldn't be fucking doing this. But obviously, you know, after they find the first artifact and they realize they're on this treasure trove, they just start amassing like a whole horde of the stuff. And, you know, everything seems to be going fine. You know, DJ's the only one freaking out, and these guys don't give a shit. So they just keep going about it. But then weird stuff starts to happen. Like, you know, there's this bowl that just keeps filling up with blood, even though obviously no one's putting blood in it. I think it's a corn grinding bowl. I like how he says that for no reason. I mean, who cares? The other guy is basically like, who cares? It's fucking bleeding, bro. Like, I don't care what the fuck they were grinding in it before. Blood corn? What are you talking about? But yeah, I mean, spooky shit starts to happen, right? The one girl's out, you know, wandering around, and she gets chased by this, you know, puma demon god creature or whatever. And then, you know, they start basically hearing like these drums and chanting coming from the ground, which is also super friggin' weird. So obviously this is all just bad news, and they should have got the fuck out of there immediately. But they don't, and you know what? You know, one dude ends up just basically stumbling upon a random campfire in the middle of nowhere that has no heat coming from it, and a weird witch face that's like chanting at him, and then it explodes, and he is possessed by Black Claw, I guess. He comes back to the camp looking like he fell down a fucking chimney and acting real weird. What do you guys think about this portion of the film? You know, all the spooky happenings before the bloodshed really begins.
A good precursor to something like that. I mean, don't really have much to say other than, you know something's coming. You know it's coming. I did like the whole exploding fire thing at the Indian village scene there.
Yeah. Super, super cool. One of my favorite scenes in the entire movie. And I like how they sort of, you know, gave you little glimpses of that chanting witch head or whatever leading up to it. And then when you finally see it and you realize that it's going to be the conduit for this fucking spirit to enter this dude. I think his name was Todd. Who cares? He's got a real tight pair of jeans on. That's all you need to know. And he's the jerk dude. So it makes sense that it would jump into him because while it's taking hold, it wouldn't immediately be apparent that there's something super wrong with this dude because he's already a jerk to begin with. So they're just kind of like, what's up his ass? You know, he's acting fucking weird, but they don't immediately act on it because he's already a jerk. I think it's at this point that DJ largely goes sort of catatonic for a good portion of the rest of the movie because she knows damn well what they're doing is causing some bad karma around this motherfucker. So she's just kind of out for the count. The other people try to make like shit's normal. Jerk dude, you know, takes his Levi's and his girlfriend out to the desert and ends up fully succumbing to the spirit of Blackhawk, getting up to some unsavory activity with that girl, and then just slashing her throat after one of the better transformation sequences I've ever seen in a movie of this age and this budget. What do you guys think of that whole bit there where, you know, we'll call him Todd when he transforms? And the throat cut.
I thought he was going to disappear like into a puddle of goo or something, like, you know, one of those. I can't remember what movie it was where you had, well, it's probably because it's been several movies they use that, where they possess a body and the body wears out and they moves on to the next one. So it's kind of cool seeing us like, oh, he's just transforming into the undead Indian dude. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I liked it. Going back to the previous scene, I mean, I enjoyed that because now stuff's getting going, so we're starting to build to something. And then I think it's nuts to think that the parts that I enjoyed most in this movie with the little cut scenes weren't even supposed to be in the movie. So it just makes me wonder how, I mean, it would have been bad. It would have been a lot slower. It would have been a lot just. It wouldn't have been very good at all without any of that stuff in it. So I'm surprised that one, Fred Olen Ray didn't want it in there, and two, like I mentioned before, that the studio added it to it, and it actually added something for the better.
Shit, dude. Paul put a hex on me for talking about his Levi's. I guess
Well, you just shut it.
Sorry about that, guys. So what did I miss? I mean, I was basically getting booted through most of that. You guys dig that fucking scene or what? Where I'm sorry to make you repeat yourselves, but I'm sure people will understand.
That's okay. I was just saying that I think it's nuts that the parts they're doing these little clips weren't supposed to be in there. So it just makes you wonder how the movie would have been pretty rough had that stuff not have been included in it.
Right. I mean, it's the more every time I watch it, I think about that because in the commentary, Fred's like, I don't know what they were doing, and I get it. They tampered with his shit. No one's gonna like that, even if they made it better, especially if they made it better, which they did. So just hush with that, Fred. Okay, we love you.
I wonder if
maybe
that's why the budget cost that much. 'Cause I wonder since they did it for him, if they, I don't know, maybe took a little more cost because the professionals are taking care of it. Maybe they took a chunk out of the budget.
I know back in these days, Fred was stealing a lot of editing time for processing facilities that he worked at. So the initial edit he did himself. They just kind of plugged in this stuff into it, which I'm glad they did. I think honestly, a big portion of the budget just comes from the fact that they were shooting on film back in these days. We're all used to digital or at least VHS onward when it comes to a lot of these indie schlock fests, but back in the film day, man, you could probably spend half of that just on the film and transportation costs, like you said, and then the rest of it went on effects and stuff. So the more I'm thinking about it, I guess it makes more sense that the film and getting it processed and all that, it could have cost 15 grand. Now you could make this movie for like 5 grand, which is just shows you how far it's came in terms of that stuff. But yeah, I don't know, man. I think that the movie would have been abysmal without those cuts, and I think they all pay off. They didn't show you enough in those little snippets of it to really spoil any of the scenes, like we do see little snippets of him transforming, and I think you do see a brief little snippet of that girl getting her throat slashed, but when you see it in its full glory and that weird slow-mo intercut with like him, that girl's just like in terror. It's such a well put together scene. I think her parts of it make the transformation as well because she looks horrified, and then he just like chases her down with that goofy little knife and cuts her throat, and it is almost an uncomfortable throat slashing. It makes it feel snuff movie-ish for a minute because it just looks a little too good based on the quality of the rest of the movie. Not complaining, it's just good effects, and then he scalps her as well. So the movie definitely lives up to its title. It hasn't sold us on something that's not going to take place. There is quite the scalping in this. I'd say even better than the scalping in Maniac. So I don't know. Any other thoughts on that bit before we move forward?
No, that's it for me, at least in that part.
So after this, basically they end up stumbling upon her body at some point. And they're like, yo, what the fuck? This dude killed her and he's now running around out here and he's sabotaged our car. They make a big deal about this pendant that he was like polishing and then he puts on once he's finally transformed or whatever. But they never really explain it. It's just kind of an artifact, I guess, that was supposed to be attached to Black Claw or whatever. But he's running around out there and they're trying to basically figure out how to get the fuck out of here. The next morning, DJ is actually probably the most level-headed one because she's been lost in her thoughts through most of the movie. So when they're freaking out and they're like, what the fuck are we going to do? She's like, well, there was that truck up the way. We could, go grab that and use that to get out of here. Old Brawny himself, the paper towel man, decides that he's going to take off and run over there to the truck and see if he can get that sorted. The truck belongs to the old man that died at the beginning of the film. And I think his corpse has a spider on it now. They just put random creepy crawlies on this corpse prop, which I don't blame him. It looks real cool. I would want to photograph that thing a bunch if I had it. He gets out there. The truck's not really in working order, so he has a seat in the bed of the truck to figure out what he's going to do. And that's pretty much when we not only get the reveal of Todd or whatever, Black Claw, fully transformed, looking gross as shit, but he just pops up and knocks the back of the guy's skull clean off his head. Just such a cool kill, man. It's not necessarily, visually like explosive, but it is definitely unique. I don't know if I've ever seen something quite like that. What do you guys think of that kill?
I mean, again, I like seeing him in the full makeup. I think it's actually very cool, especially with the budget in the film. I think sometimes I don't know. I think we said it in the beginning. I wonder if they put everything into the kills and effects.
I think so, man. A lot of it definitely went in there because there is several different prosthetics that you see throughout the movie, a couple of different puppets, some decent gore effects, and then certainly like the fading in and out of some of the visuals on the screen, like when the lion man fades out or whatever. Even doing it in the test footage, I mean, that type of shit cost money back in the day. You couldn't just kind of throw it in Movie Maker and click a little fade button and have it done. It was like a physical thing that had to happen with film, so there's plenty of that went on, and they did shoot some pretty glorious sort of B-roll shots in this movie as well. The cinematography is pretty on point in a lot of segments, and then you can tell there's like almost some second unit stuff that Fred had someone shoot that is sort of shakier than it needs to be. But it all cuts together nicely. They managed to find use for all of it. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something so eerie and creepy about that scene where the dude knocks the back of his skull off. It's just such an odd death, Usually it would have been like your standard axe kill with the tomahawk or some shit right into the dude's fucking skull or something like that. But I guess it was just a little piece of like, hair with like some gunk on the back of it and fishing line, and they just jerked it off of the back of his head and the blood comes out his mouth and he hits the deck. And it's just, I don't know, there's something special about that. And the way they shoot it in that. Go ahead.
You think about, this was done 40 years ago. And it's still, it looks good for that. Even it makes it look, better just because they're working with a lot little back then. It's a lot more practical effects. So it looked really good. That, and then on top of you're talking about the full reveal, like especially for 40 years ago, like, dude looked great.
Yeah. I actually like that kill too. I actually think that kill was one of the better kills because it was quick, but brutal at the same time. I thought that's sometimes that the simple like that is best.
Exactly. It's I would say it's the most inventive kill of the movie for sure. Because like you said, just it's simple but effective. It's super brutal, imagining just knocking an entire chunk out of the back of this guy's skull. And I don't know that it would have benefited from us seeing like his brain fall out of the back of that skull when he hit the bed of the truck. I think just the blood out the mouth was fine. The slow-mo is really what sells it, and it gives it a quality that is very reminiscent of like that final reveal in Friday the 13th where baby Jason comes out of the lake and he's like, fucking, it reminds me a lot of that. I think that they might have even been doing it sort of as a nod to that, maybe, because he is like popping up behind, you could argue the bed of the truck is a vaguely boat-shaped receptacle that this dude is sitting in. There's a lot of parallels there that I find really neat. So this basically leaves us with just, his hot girlfriend, his super hot girlfriend that is very worried about him. And then, you know, DJ and the nerd guy. This girl, I think, ends up insisting on like going out to look for him or whatever. And she ends up just getting filled full of arrows, which was pretty cool. Again, a lot of these movies would have just won and done it, like shot her in the face with an arrow or something.
She took a
But
lot.
she ends up looking, she takes like 5 or 6 arrows,
Yeah.
I think. So,
She's still screaming. She's still going.
yeah. And her final kill actually does happen off screen. But at this point in the film, we've seen plenty of good stuff on screen, and there's plenty of good stuff still to come. So it doesn't bum me out that we actually don't see, you know, the final cut. You know,
You got the arrows.
Dying, but
we got the arrows. I felt good with that.
I do find it funny that they never opted for this, you know, native spirit after he's possessed this dude to ever ditch the jeans and just make like a loincloth or something so he could be more agile. It would make sense. But I guess
think about it. Maybe he's never worn jeans before and he just really liked them.
Yeah, it was a good fit too. That guy wore them in nicely. You know, they were ready to roll.
Maybe they sponsored the movie.
They might have, but I doubt it. Who knows who sponsored this? Fred probably just sold a bunch of fucking reels that he stole from one of these film warehouses he was working for, and financed half the movie that way. I mean, if you listen to the dude, which I'm sure you will as you start buying his movies, he makes no bones about the fact that he did a bunch of shady shit. He's sort of like Charlie Band. If Charlie Band didn't pretend that, you know, he found a bunch of wizard tapes in a warehouse, Fred would be like, yeah, we're just gonna print those fucking VHS rips onto Blu-rays and sell them to you for $20. If you don't want to buy it, fuck you. You know, that's kind of his deal.
He did. I don't remember
he's
which.
old school
I don't
about
remember. I don't remember which one it was on, but on one of the Sterling box sets, there's an interview with him, Sterling, and J.R. Bookwalter, and it's a good 45-minute watch. Just them talking about all
sounds amazing.
The stuff. I'm not sure which one it's on, but it's on one of. If it's not easier to find, you can find it on YouTube for sure. It's a pretty good watch.
Yeah, even David's mullet's not worthy to be in their company, but I would like to see that.
Don't you dare.
Fred is a fucking legend, man. I mean, and this is where he got his beginning. You know, it's a solid fucking start. You could argue that, you know, the giant leeches or whatever the fuck it was, or Alien Dead is really his first movies. Yeah, they are, but those are almost like home movies. You know, this is a proper film. And it's a shame that it didn't get a wider, you know, drive-in release or something like that. Because I think this movie could have been a hit in that circuit, you know, if it had been pushed out there more like that. And it sounds like it wasn't, which is a bummer. But pretty much after that girl is dead, you know, we're down to just DJ and the nerd and Black Claw, aka Todd, aka Boot Jeans. And, you know, have their showdown at the campfire, and Nerd Dude is able to just plug his ass with the rifle that they've been carrying around the entire time, but really not making adequate use of until this moment. And, you know, all seems like it should be well and fine. But it turns out that DJ is possessed too, and she just chops his fucking head off with the shovel. Which feels like a nod to Evil Dead as well, because Ash chops that girl's head off with the shovel. I don't know if that happened in Evil Dead 2 or the first one. I think it's the first one.
I don't remember.
But that might even be an intentional nod to Evil Dead with the shovel death. What do you guys think of that? Were you expecting that dude to just get his head lopped off by that fucking shovel?
I wasn't, but I wasn't complaining when it happened.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was just a fun kill at that point. I was just in the moment enjoying it. So when it came, it just came. I was like, yeah, that's it.
Right. Yeah, and you'd think that would be an adequate end to the film too if they really wanted to just leave it there, but they go the one step further of having DJ like fully possessed sitting in the tent, you know, or whatever. Obviously alluding to it being a teepee kind of, and the one dude comes in and sticks his head in there, the professor, and just takes an arrow to the eye, and that's the end of the movie. We're not sure if he died or not. Maybe just passed out from the shock of it. I like to think he's out there with an eye patch, being a proper pirate and robbing some more graves in the sequel that we never got. But what do you guys think of the overall end to the film? You think it was a worthy
I'd love to
climax
see
to the events that preceded?
I'd love to see a sequel where the professor comes in and saves them, and there's just like a whole bunch of possessed like people, and he comes in there with an eye patch, and he's all like Mad Maxed out, and he ends up being the badass for some reason.
Hell yeah, dude. That would have been sick if he showed up with like vampire hunting gear and different shit. Like, I've been doing this for years, you know. So robbing graves, you're gonna fucking what's that?
I was so happy he came back. Like I would love a sequel that he is the star of the show.
Oh yeah,
for sure.
And then maybe somehow he like it starts out as like a spoof of The Exorcism, where he's like giving DJ an exorcism, and then they become like a Ghostbusters team fighting all these fucking random native spirits out in the desert, or just other spirits. It doesn't have to just be native ones, or it could be native ones from various parts of the world.
They can recruit the
world tour.
They can recruit Keith from the gas station to help him decipher what spirits they're actually going after.
Hell yeah, dude. Just paying them in reclaimed arrowheads or something.
Right.
Take these back to your people. Yeah, what could have been, you know. I think that the ending is pretty sick. I like movies that end on like a bleak note like that. Horror films, at least. Because it just, you know, it leaves it open-ended. Even if they hadn't teased a sequel, we'd still be sitting here talking about what could have been with a sequel, because the movie is strong enough to generate one. I don't know. You guys got any thoughts about those final sequences we didn't touch on before we jump into general production and, you know, favorite scenes, favorite characters, all that stuff?
I think we nailed it.
We got it.
Good stuff. So in terms of like, you know, production or bits of trivia, one thing that is worth noting is that this was shot on a ranch that is now apparently owned by Alice Cooper, which is pretty cool that he owns a ranch that Scalps was shot at. And when they were shooting it, they did, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning, they did this movie with almost no permission or permits or anything like that. It was very much like a on-the-fly indie project. But they were, you know, they kind of found this ranch, and I guess they asked the family permission to sort of, you know, maybe run like an extension cord from their house. There was like this family that lived on the property. Not only did they let them like run their extension cord from the house, but they ended up kind of taking in the whole crew during the production of the movie and like letting them, I think, sleep there and eat there, and they would make them like sandwiches and shit, which I've always just found super wholesome, you know.
That's cool.
Again, something I feel like would be less common nowadays, you know.
That's a very 80s thing to do.
Yeah, it's like, oh, these kids are out here making a scary movie. Let's you know, let them set up camp like right in our fucking dining room.
That's that's Polonia Brothers level stuff right there.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's super sweet, man. I mean, nowadays, if you were rolling in there with proper film equipment and all that shit, even as an indie crew, I think they'd be harder. Folks nowadays be harder pressed to let you do it without asking for money or something. So pretty cool. But yeah, that's pretty much the only trivia behind it. I mean, this real small production. The thing about the editing that we've already went over is like the other main bit of trivia. I forget a lot of the stuff that Fred talks about in the commentary, but I feel like I remember it being real informative. Like I said, I probably should have fit in a viewing of that before this, but you know, if we talked about all of that here, you guys wouldn't be able to go out there, watch the movie and check out the commentary and enjoy it for yourself. But in terms of like editing, like we've talked about, it's the editing really, I think, saves it from being a very slow movie at parts, and it's still kind of slow. I still firmly believe it could be 20-25 minutes shorter, and that would tighten it up. But all things considered, you know, like we said, the way they edit the stuff in saves a lot of it from being just a slog at the beginning. At least once they're out there and the spooky stuff starts happening, the movie is pretty perfectly paced all the way to the end. I don't know. In terms of like characters, did you guys have a favorite character of the bunch if you had to narrow it down to just one?
Are we doing just the kids?
What's that?
Are you talking about just the kids or just anybody?
Anybody. Yeah, like who's the standout MVP character of the movie for you?
Harbinger.
He is pretty great. What about you, Cody?
I'd say toss up between the professor and Keith.
Yeah, those are probably my favorite characters as well. If I had to pick one of the kids, I guess probably fucking DJ, even though she's cringeworthy. I just find her the most entertaining through the movie because she's so cringeworthy. So yeah, she's pretty great for that quality. But I think probably a tie between those dudes as well. Sort of leaning towards the professor because I just find the dude super comical and sort of sleazy.
I just want them to. They just need to do a buddy comedy. I just want them to comedy.
I could see that working out where it's like those dudes, and kind of like Lethal Weapon, because the other dude was clearly older than the professor, but the professor's old as fuck too. So it's like,
right.
The professor and Black Claw team up, like and they solve mysteries. And
what could go wrong?
Black Claw convinces the professor it's bad to raid archaeological grounds, so they go on like adventures trying to stop people from raiding like burial grounds and stuff.
Trying to right wrongs.
That would be cool. Or maybe Black Claw kills the kids that's raiding them so that the professor can loot them. That'd be sweet.
Why not?
If you guys had to pick, go ahead. Sorry, what's that?
Why not?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it could be lucrative for the both of them. How's Black Claw going to afford those jeans? Otherwise, he clearly developed a taste for them in this film. So if you guys had to pick a favorite scene, I guess you could do favorite scene, favorite kill, or favorite shot, favorite kill, whatever. There is a favorite shot that I have in the movie that I like for a lot for some reason, which we'll get to. But go ahead. What about you, Brandon? You go first.
Well, I think that my favorite is the Harbinger scene, just because I love how the gas station attendant is just like, oh, they'll figure it out. And as far as the kill, I like that kill where the guy is in the truck. You just see like takes off a part of the guy's head. He just slams down and coughs at the blood. I just like that kill. That's a cool kill.
Yeah, that is pretty great. What about you, Cody?
I think we're unanimous on favorite scene. I'm going to say favorite kill is a toss-up between the actual scalping or the chick that took all the arrows.
Both solid. I think mine's got to be the whole sequence where the girl gets her friggin' throat slit and then gets scalped. It's just so graphic, man. Like I said, it's almost kind of uncomfortable, because the rest of the kills in the movie, while rad, are considerably more tame in the gruesome factor than that one is.
Multiple
they
arrows,
really
though.
went for
Pretty
it.
sweet.
That is sweet. But there's something about that fucking throat slit. Even I think that on its own, the scalping is an awesome bonus. That's just like, God damn, they really went for it with this. And I guess they had to scalp someone. But that throat slit is like super deep, and the way he does it so quick, it just makes it feel like, God damn, he almost like cut her real throat, maybe. I'm sure it was safe and all that, but it gives the element of it being dangerous, or it implies danger, I guess, the way that they do it. And it makes my skin crawl every time I watch it. It's almost a little too violent for the rest of the movie. Which is awesome. I'm always going to give that a thumbs up. So what do you guys think of the soundtrack? I guess that's the production design is kind of non-existent. I mean, there's the makeup we've all touched on being pretty good for especially the budget and the time. There really isn't anything in the way of sets that were built because it's just literally them in the desert with a couple of tents. So, I mean, good job, nature. Full marks for production design. It looked real good. Real good nature you had there. But what do you guys think of the soundtrack? Is what I'm getting at.
You go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, production design was fine. I mean, you do what you got to do, and setting was perfect. So, hey, good way of taking the budget and moving forward with it.
Right, right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's you don't really need like a bunch of sets built for a movie like this. I think the teepee was the only thing that they maybe had to make in terms of like set pieces or whatever. Uh, their tent was just a tent, from what I remember. Like was like a canvas tent that you would take out to the desert. You know,
Right.
Fred probably already had it in his garage or something. Um,
Yeah, or they borrowed
and-
it from that family.
That's actually a good point. Yeah, that might have been the thing. Knowing Fred and how fucking cheap that dude is sometimes, he probably did go out there without a tent. And I was like, oh yeah, tent couldn't hurt. If you guys want to lend us one. We're probably gonna get blood all over it, but yeah. But I don't know. I think that this in terms of like the production of the film. Oh, I forgot to mention my favorite shot. It's that scene where DJ like walks behind these trees and there's like a shot through the branches of the trees that is just, I love it. I don't know why I love that shot. It's just, it almost reminds me of like 70s horror films I've seen a bunch of, or like weird sort of psychedelic exploitation flicks that you would see back then, where it's like, it's just a shot through some tree branches for no reason. I think she's just walking back to the camp or something like that, but she stops for a moment of reflection or whatever, and the breeze is blowing her hair, and it's one of those magical shots, you know, where like it focused in just right on her as her hair is kind of blowing, and she's looking off in the distance, and that's it. It's like a pointless shot, but I love it. But I think that the music, in terms of the technical end of this movie, the music and the editing are the two standouts. And the music itself, the whole soundtrack, I fucking love. I think it's vinyl worthy. I would definitely buy this, like, and display it proudly and listen to it regularly. Because while there isn't a ton of pieces of music, all the pieces of music I think are really good. They've got that great 80s like synth thing going on, and they mix in like the tribal motif well when they put it in there. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on that stuff?
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, for what it was good. It was good mood music.
Mm-hmm.
It was indeed.
Yeah, fit right in with what they needed.
I love the way they just let it fucking, you know, they just go right back into that fucking thumping, like just thunderous fucking synth soundtrack at the end too, and they show the logo on the screen again. I love when horror movies end where like the last badass thing happens in the movie and then they show you the logo again for no fucking reason. Not that they think that you've forgotten what movie you're watching. They just want you to know that, yeah, tell your friends, Scalps. It's fucking perfect, man.
Right.
If I ever, you know, when we inevitably do a horror film, I'd like to try to write some shit like that. I'm just a fan of that gimmick. It serves absolutely no purpose, you know, because you've been sitting there, you've sat there for 90 minutes, you know what movie you're watching. But if you have that badass scene that punches just right, and then you do the logo, it's like, god damn, yeah, you know, that was the movie, and I will be telling my friends. But yeah, that's I think we've done this the proper you know, work down or whatever, rundown, whatever you want to call it. Find film, you know, if you're into low budget indie stuff, it's important to go back to the 80s or the 70s or wherever, you know, look up schlock wherever you can find it. Find these low budget projects because they've been going on since fucking cameras have existed pretty much, or at least in a consumer capacity where like your average person could get a hold of one or rent the equipment outside of Hollywood. So, you know, there's stuff, it's easy to think that, oh, this must be an invention of like modern cameras or VHS or something like that, but it dates back further than that. And that's kind of what I was trying to impress upon our spread of episodes here by submitting something like Scalps. It's, you know, a classic piece of vintage schlock or retro schlock. I don't know if it's vintage yet. I think we're all at that spot where we don't want to think of the 80s or the 90s as vintage. We're not that old yet. You know? but it's certainly retro schlock, and it's a solid piece of it at that. Would you guys agree? Would you recommend this to your friends? I guess is what I'm getting.
Absolutely.
Well, depends on the friends, I guess. But yeah, anybody who is into this type of thing, yeah, definitely.
I think this is one Jake would like. I think Jake would enjoy elements of Scalps. I think there's a lot of it he would find insufferable, but that's to be expected. And you know, if you guys, obviously, I'm hoping this will set some people off on a journey through Fred's filmography. There's a lot of duds in there later on, because Fred, again, makes no bones about doing what he's got to do to pay the bills or like get movies he actually wants to do made. So he will take some heinous fucking shitty projects to get that done, or to just pat out college funds for his kids or whatever he does with that shit from his many ex-wives. But the point is that Fred has a lot of great films, and this kicked off pretty much like a solid 12-year run of him doing only awesome movies almost. And it is, I'm proud to have almost all of them in my collection. There's a couple that you can only kind of see online through YouTube and stuff. They haven't like really had releases outside of VHS yet, but by and large, most of them you can get, and a fair amount of them you can get on makeflix.com. So I would highly recommend popping over there and checking out like the retro media section. Retro media is Fred Olen Ray, so if you guys are familiar with that label, that's how you get a lot of his stuff on Blu-ray. So there will certainly be more Fred submissions in the future. He's one of my favorite low budget directors. Tons of great stuff that we're going to be doing on here, like Phantom Empire or Biohazard or obviously Chainsaw Hookers. Those are all going to be going down on Schlockaholics eventually. Pretty much him, Don Dohler, and Chris Seaver will probably be my most frequent submissions. And then, of course, like Joe Sherlock, because I really dig those dudes. So, I don't know. I think this has been a wild success, boys. This was a fun discussion. We talked about everything that you need to know really about Scalps without, leaving you nothing to discover yourself. What were you going to say, Septim?
Are we wanting to do picks on this one?
Yeah. I thought maybe what we could do is instead of like doing the random, what we've submitted with movies, just random names as to who goes next on the lineup, and then you can just pick it at that time. That way, if something hits your fancy at a particular time when it comes up, like October's next month and all that stuff. So some people might be like, "Ooh, I could do this one this month."
True. Yeah. So you want to just spin for who selects next, and then whoever gets it, just that's whose movie we'll do.
That's who we start off with, then spin between the next two of us, and then the last one gets the next one.
Yeah, that works
all
for
right,
me.
So that actually sounds like a good way to do this going forward. So I actually do have to hit the loo here, though. Got to release some of those fucking Native American spirits back to the earth. You guys should definitely plug anything that you got going up real quick, and then when I get back, I will, throw out a couple quick plugs, and then we'll let the people know who's going to be selecting the next film. If you also want to subconsciously think about what your film will be, so we can announce it right now, that'd be real cool.
I know what it'll be if I'm selected. Yeah. But yeah, of course, I'm Septim Sen versus the world. We love our physical media. Right now, working really hard on finishing my Sharkula review. I've got the script written up. I've seen the film, actually this time 7 times.
Wow.
And once with the commentary. So I feel like I'm prepared, and full script is written. So my psychoanalysis of Sharkula is coming up, and that'll end all of my obligations when it comes to favors for people. If anybody else asks me to review one or do an analysis on one, it'll come behind my next 2, because I gotta hit Games Master. What have you done? And Dungeon Rubber, and one of the Evan Jacobs movies I've been wanting to do forever. But the big thing is the Versus Awards, which is coming up on the 30th of this month. That is going to be taking pretty much precedent for our channel. So if you see a little bit less content coming out, that's because we are really hitting it. and that's the big thing for that. It's that's our big concentration right now.
You might see a couple of familiar faces over there too. Tune into those Versus Awards. We're gonna be up in it. That's all I'm saying. So what about you, Cody? You got anything going on? Any recent unboxing videos? Any recent projects that are about to hit the airwaves? Anything like that?
Unboxings, no. There might be one coming up when I get something in the mail that I've already kind of told you guys about. With my 2 recent things that came out were from SOV Horror, from Tony on those 2 anthology series, the Natasha Knighty's Boudoir of Terror and Topless Tories something. But I've got a commercial in each one of those, and those are also have shorts in it that were made by Sherlock, Joseph Vogeley, and a few others. I don't want to forget anybody, but I mean, if you're a fan of the Skullface Astronaut Camp, I mean, for me, I haven't got him yet. I'm really looking forward to it, not only because I have a part in it, but just having something that, Skullface Astronaut had a part of is just a nice little feather in my cap. I also have a decent amount of some of my stuff for sale directly. So if you guys want to check anything out with me, just hit me up on Facebook. I'll cut you a deal. And
fucking hey, dude. Speaking of that, and Skullface Astronaut, Joe has some posters available too that he's trying to sell. I'm gonna grab some of those up here in the next few days. But if you guys want to pop over there on Facebook, you can just find Joe Sherlock directly. I think he also shared it on the Skullface Astronaut page. So help support indie filmmaking. He's currently in the process of making some stuff, and I'm sure any extra cash that you can kick that way is going to go to a good cause.
Super great guy. He's easy to do business with. You won't regret.
Yeah, doing some, and I mean, any money you kick his way is going to go towards something rad. Even if it doesn't go on a current movie, he'll be buying some pickles with it, or getting old Mr. Birch some mayonnaise, something like that.
That's right. Some Roger Corman's.
Got to get a jar of that, man. I should have taken him up on it when he was talking about it a while back, but hopefully he can do some more.
I'm sure if we hit him up, and he'd be happy to oblige.
Yeah, I don't need it to be screen used or anything. I just need it to be that fucking Corman's own mayonnaise or whatever.
Put it right by the box set.
I don't think that's what he called it, but he could do that. If he ever does like some salad dressing, he could do Corman's own salad dressing, like Newman's own.
True.
You remember that shit?
Yeah.
Good stuff. So I don't have a ton coming up. Well, actually, I do have quite a bit coming up. The more I think about it, we have, obviously that Alien Dead discussion with David Strege over on Delusions of Grandeur that I plugged earlier. But we also tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time are going to be running a Cinemalog Fright Fest for the Scream franchise, where we're going to talk about all 5 of those films. We got some cool people coming in for that. My buddy Chris Pico, the old ass retro gamer, is going to be there. I know Jack Hunter is going to make an appearance. Any of you guys are free to stop by. It's going to be cross-streamed between both channels, and I think it's going to be a good time and get the ball rolling on doing more of these in the future. Having watched the films is not necessary. I mean, obviously, watching them is a prerequisite, but I literally just marathoned all of them this past weekend, so you don't have to have watched them right now, but if you've seen the Scream movies and you could sit in on a general conversation for them, you're more than welcome. I think it's going to be a rad time, like I said. And then other than that, I'm just trying to do some Inside Movies Galore stuff over here this next week. We got a double feature of Sanjuro and Yojimbo that we're going to be fucking with. If you guys like some old school samurai action, come over there. I'm sure Septimson probably adequately plugged it, but I do want to double down on that because I think they're going to be good discussions. And then other than that, I have a discussion for Full Moon Live. We're going to be dropping another volume of that on the Retro Cult Home video channel with Chris Pico, the old ass retro gamer, for Bad Channels, one of my favorite Full Moon films. So looking forward to that as well. Good slate of discussions for me going on, just not a lot of personal content as of yet. But I do have some standalone cinema log stuff that I have been logging, and I will be recording here in the near future. So a lot of ratings on films that I've put out there, a lot of them that people don't agree with. But you know what? It's the beauty of taste being subjective, baby. We all have different opinions. So There it is. My own ratings actually don't even match with how I actually feel about the film. In my mind, Mac and Me is at fucking 10. But if I'm being objective and rating it with numbers, it's a 5. Yeah, it's just the way ratings work. I surprise myself with them sometimes. And I've typically, avoided rating films, but I think it's a fun exercise in like looking at a movie based on enjoyment and then looking at it subjective or objectively and being like, okay, this could be better. This is, better than it should be. You know what I'm saying? Like actually looking at it and being like, as much as I love those crappy effects, I can't give them full points for that because they could have done better, kind of a thing. So, yeah, that's what we got going on. I want to thank you guys for coming in for another episode of Schlockaholics. I think this one went pretty well. And these are only going to get better as they go, or worse. But we're going to have a good time doing them either way. Hopefully, you guys have a good time listening to them. And hopefully you guys have a good time with our group-oriented activities that we're going to be rolling out as we go. I've been Mosley. You've been a bunch of sexy beasts. We have been the Schlockaholics, and we will see you back here next time.